What's up, gang? Welcome to Room and Board. My name is Chris George, and it's Monday morning. And you know what that means? My neighbor has once again had all of his clothes thrown onto the front yard. That dirty dog. It's like clockwork every Monday morning. You'd think they'd just bite the bullet and be open with each other. Probably a lot easier. Save a lot of dry cleaning, for sure. But that aside, Monday morning also means we have another episode of Crowdfunding Countdown, where we take a look at all the BGCs effing up this W, the board game campaigns that are finishing up this week. But first, before we get into that, seemingly as always, although I never take it for granted, I would like to thank my newest patrons for supporting the channel. These sorts of videos take a bunch of work. Well, okay, everything takes a bunch of work. The world is awful and life is hard. But with your help, it makes it a little less so. And allows me to spend more and more time on these videos and other videos. And I am immensely grateful to you all. And especially this shout out goes out to all of our newest members, Marcella, Nigel, Matt, Daniel, and Ben. You are the friggin' bomb. All of you. Thank you for believing in the channel and supporting it. And if you're watching this and you're thinking, shut up, just get to the games, well, feel free to support me at my highest tier on Patreon and I'll never do a shout out for you ever. Anyway, that's done with. Let's move on to the games. We don't have as many as I was expecting this week. So I'm assuming next week it's going to be really bananas. And I'm just going to keep on saying that until we have an absolutely bonkers week. And then I can say, see, I told you it was coming. I was just building the hype, practicing that sort of Kickstarter thing everyone keeps doing. But this week we are starting off with Skytear Horde. And I've done a full video on this game. I put it out last Friday. So I'm not going to rehash a lot of what I said there. But basically, if you didn't check that one out, it's a solo-only card-driven lane battler in which you have to defend your castle against an endless horde of monsters. And it was fun. I enjoyed it. It didn't turn me into a solo player, but it was a good time. But what I do want to talk about for this one, which I didn't really cover in that other review, is the different pledge tiers. Because you have the €25 for the base pledge, which is around $38 Canadian, or you can bump that up to €40, around 57 Canadian, for the gameplay pledge, where you get an extra deck in each category, an extra alliance deck and an extra horde deck. Or you can go even further and get to the €60 or $86 Canadian, and that's where you get that beautiful little magnetic box. You can store your little playmat in and have nice little storage areas for all your tokens and decks, and it really does look lovely. Do you need it? Absolutely not. And I'm really at odds with these sorts of price increases, actually. Because on the one hand, I think $38 for that base game, that feels okay. That feels pretty good. You get 6 different decks, 3 Alliance, 3 Horde, you can mix and match, you get all the tokens, whatever, that feels nice. And then when you get up to that next level, it's another €15 or $20 Canadian for just 2 extra decks. And I get wanting to upsell, and maybe the margins are smaller on one side or the other, and to have a 30% increase from the base pledge to that gameplay pledge feels, I don't know, feels weird to me. Even though most of the stretch goals are targeted at that Kickstarter gameplay pledge, still most of the stretch goals are just, here's an extra card, or here's an extra monster, or things that I don't know if you're going to necessarily miss in the retail version. And then when you get to the deluxe pledge, well, just make sure that you're really excited about the game and that you think you will enjoy it. Because I did have a printed out playmat, and it was nice. It was nice to have a spot for everything when I was playing, but it's absolutely not necessary. But then again, I always feel that way about playmats, so you do you if that's what you're excited about, and I know some of you are. Don't let me stop you. But in terms of what I think is personally the best deal, I think I'm leaning towards just the retail box, because the uptick in price seems so significant, and it doesn't seem like you're getting as much of a percentage increase in content, if that makes sense. So I would probably just opt for the retail pledge, or that sort of base version. See if you like it. I've been going back and forth, but I think for me, if I was interested, I'm interested at that sort of lower level rather than needing to go all in, because I don't think that increase is reflected in the content that you get. But you know what? It's still a solid game, so if you get it, I hope you enjoy it. If you are interested in backing, that finishes up this Thursday, January 27th at 11:03 a.m. Now, next up, we have Guardians of Fire. Dun, 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 dun. dun, 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 which is anything but the Chariots of Fire theme song. That hopeful tune. It is an epic campaign game. It claims to give you 50 hours of content. But what's different about this one is that while most campaigns are usually everyone versus the campaign, in this one you have one lucky or unlucky person taking on the role of the villain, bent on destroying the land, the Angra. So if you particularly despise one member of your friend group and you want to subtly let them know by wailing on them for over 50 hours, hey, this might be the game for you. Personally, that would make me a bit Angra. I know you saw that one coming. But this is an interesting pitch. The Angra player also is encouraged to read up on what's coming and what's going to come in subsequent episodes so that they really know the best way to screw with the other players. And what that translates to me is that it's very much of the same mind of having a dungeon master, except a dungeon master that is actively working to screw you over and then using the upcoming information about the land that only they know to make you lose even harder. What is a little unique about this one is the action system. You have your basic actions, search, move, attack. Those are the things that your characters can do on their turn. It's in this dungeon crawler sort of format. But when you take an action, you draw a little disc out of a bag or a cylinder, whatever it is, to see if your action succeeds. And most of them will be your color, but sometimes you draw out a black disc, which means either you stop your turn entirely or the darkness track increases, the Angra player gets even stronger, and then you can put it back in the bag and hope you don't draw it again and try to do another action. But it's this trade-off because the further along the darkness track that the Angra player gets, the Angrarier they become. And more importantly, they get access to more monsters and more power, and if the darkness track ever reaches the end of the track, then the Angra player is no longer Angra and is Hapa. And because they win the game. So you just have to complete whatever episode that you're playing and whatever the scenario entailed and whatever the scenario said you needed to do before the end of that track. And as for the Angra player, on their turn, they basically just position and summon monsters. I do like that they can take a monster and just run it off the board into the darkness, into another area that needs to be explored. So they're kind of luring the players in if they need to take out that particular powerful monster, and then they reveal that actual room that the monster is retreated into, and surprise, it's filled with spiders or something. Oh, I don't know why I said that. But I also like that the further up the track they are, the more they can actually use some of that darkness and lower it to summon their really big monsters, these great mythical devas, as they're called, and they are horrid. They have horrid attacks, like demanding you only give them red M&Ms or locking themselves in their dark trailer and never coming out until you come and get them. Just real deva stuff. They're pretty big devas, that's all I gotta say. And that's basically the game. It seems fine. It just doesn't seem super notable to me, although I will admit that the Angra player has a little bit access to more options than I expected them to have, which I think is always the case of my own bias towards one versus all games. I always think the one won't be having a lot to do on their turn, and then usually they do. But it's incredibly expensive. The core pledge is 116 euros. That's just the core, which is $169 Canadian, and that's before shipping. Although you still can get some early bird pledges for 99 euros, which is $140 Canadian. Still expensive, certainly not an early bird, just an average bird who woke up at a normal time and realized that, hey, I can have my fill of the worms if no one else has been eating them. But if that sounds interesting to you, you have until January 27th at 7 p.m. to decide. Now, next up, we have the Viscounts of the West Kingdom expansion Kickstarter, where they're giving you 2 expansions, Keeper of the Keys and Gator of the Gates. Sorry, Gates of Gold. Those are the 2 expansions. And maybe this is finally the end of the West Kingdom trilogy. These are expansions for the 3rd game of the 2nd trilogy in the Shem Phillips Garp Hill series. But what I always love about these Kickstarters is they started off with this big disclaimer that says, you will be able to get these at places other than Kickstarter. There are no Kickstarter exclusives. We're not trying to capitalize on FOMO. We're not trying to get you to buy it. Don't buy it. Stop buying it. Don't give us money here. Just don't do it. Basically is what they're saying. And I think it's an awesome disclaimer. I love that they put this forward. I love that they're so clear about it. They're saying, listen, if you don't want to pay the shipping, you don't have to. And it's kind of astonishing to me that they're still using Kickstarter when they are just using it as a pre-order system. And you'd think that if they just put it out on their website as a pre-order system, then they wouldn't have to pay the 7 to 10% in Kickstarter fees that they're doing. But I guess that's the cost of doing business. It must be with the accessibility of the platform. It must be with the recognizability of the platform. And hey, you know what? I probably wouldn't have found out about it if they hadn't put it on Kickstarter. So I'm sorry, Garphill Games, for personally costing you all that money. You know, you could have just paid me the 10% and then I would have talked about it, I promise. Because even with that disclaimer, these Kickstarters still usually raise around the tune of $500,000 or more. I remember the last expansions they did for Paladins were like that, and this is the same thing. And basically, it's 33 bucks Canadian for each expansion, or $92 Canadian for both expansions, and a box to keep them in. Okay, fine, it's a collector's box, you can get some promos with them, but I don't know. I don't know if it feels great spending the same amount on just a box of storage as it does to purchase one of the expansions. You'll have to let me know what you think. I'm curious. I'm at odds with this one. I mean, you probably do want the box if you're a hardcore collector and you enjoy the game. It gives you an organizational system, and what I do love about that particular game series as well, I only have Architects, I can only speak about Architects, but the boxes are so great because they're so compact. Everything fits in there perfectly, and you don't have an overblown box on your shelf, which means, hey, you can get more boxes on your shelf and feed that addiction even more. I mean, for me personally, I'd probably just buy the 2 expansions and deal with having 2 boxes rather than this collector's edition box. But I can understand for those of you who do want it. Honestly though, looking at these 2 expansions, they don't seem like that much content that you need to pay the shipping for them. Or you can't just order it from Garphill's site in order to save them the 5 to 10% or whatever they're paying in fees. Or that you can't buy it at your local game store because they'll absolutely get it in stock for you for probably a cheaper price. But if you're a big fan of Viscounts, you probably already know if you want these expansions or not. What I do know is that certainly you don't need to spend $472 on the entire King's Pledge, which gets you every collector's box from every game in the West Kingdom trilogy and every expansion piled in. I mean, that's quite a lot of money. I got Architects of the West Kingdom for 10% of that, and I enjoy it just fine without all of that extra content. And unrelated, I also enjoyed paying my rent that month and getting to live in my apartment for another 30 days. Because don't forget, there are no shortage of trilogies coming from Garphill Games. Wayfarers of the South Tigris is scheduled to launch this year, followed by Scholars of the South Tigris next, and Inventors of the South Tigris in 2024, until he moves on to his 4th trilogy, which I don't know all of the titles, but I do have some exclusive information about the first title in the 4th trilogy after the South Tigris. I just know the name, Naughty Little Urchin Children of the North Pole. I don't know about you, but it sounds pretty good. I can't wait to see what mechanics will be in that one. Anyway, if you are interested in jumping on board the Kickstarter, that is Thursday at 8 p.m. Now, next up, we have the Dice Tower. Look, Mom, I made it. I'm on the Dice Tower. I'm talking about the Dice Tower. I'm looking at the Dice Tower. I've done very well at lowering my parents' expectations of me day by day. That's just a little sneak example. But a lot of other board game media have mentioned this. The Dice Tower runs on a model of a Kickstarter every year rather than relying on a monthly sort of thing like Patreon, as many other channels do. More popular channels, some might say. But they've partnered with a bunch of board game companies and have a bunch of promos. So if you want to throw them 50 bucks and get yourself a whole whack load of promos, go check it out. You'll get 1 card for a game that you like and then a whole bunch more for games that you don't own yet. But it's a fun campaign, and while watching Tom's A Week in the Life of the Dice Tower video made me slightly depressed because it looks a lot like mine, and I certainly don't make $14,000 in YouTube advertising yet. I barely make that through all of my revenue streams in a year. But it is a really cool video that I do recommend everyone check out because it's really cool to see all that behind the scenes action and all the work that they really put in over on that channel. They have 8 full-time employees, and they pay them a living wage. And I think that alone is so exciting and incredible and aspirational. And let's face it, they basically set the bar in terms of board game coverage existing, almost. I like watching their stuff. Well, more specifically, I like knowing that no matter what the game is, they probably have something about it. Even if I just click on it and say, what did they say? Oh, cool. And you really have to give them props. I think they have been instrumental in cultivating a lot of people's love and enjoyment for the hobby for a very, very long time. I mean, I guarantee everybody who's watching this video, you've heard of the Dice Tower. You probably know this Kickstarter is going on, except you, Mom and Dad. Don't worry, you're exempt, and I will happily take your compliments of, you're doing a wonderful job, honey. My parents are great. I feel very lucky to have them, until, of course, they stop contributing to my Patreon, and then good luck finding me around the Thanksgiving table. But anyway, if you're interested in checking out what the Dice Tower Kickstarter has to offer, what sort of promos they have, maybe you can get a group buy of a bunch of people who want that one card and split it up and still support them at the same time, well, you have until Friday at 11:59 p.m. to decide. Now, next up, we have a game called Solarpunk Futures, whose tagline is, a social ecological game where you and your friends build a better world. And those sorts of taglines usually translate to, this is going to be a boring non-game. Now, sometimes I'm surprised with how people tackle this theme, but in this case, it looks more like a thought experiment, more than an actual game that you're going to want to buy and play more than never. You're going to get a challenge card, and it's going to give you a challenge, and you're going to have to describe why that was challenging for your ancestors. And then you're going to get an ancestor and like a tool card and say, well, my ancestors will use their tools. You have 5 minutes to decide. Everyone put your pen and paper down. My ancestors used their hammer to beat global warming in the face. And that's how we built a utopian future. I mean, sure, but it's also $57 Canadian plus another $8 in shipping for like an 80 card deck that I don't think is very relevant to most people who are probably watching this video. And honestly, I was quite disappointed because it's raised $23K. That's a good amount. And it's got a cool, awesome name. And I like storytelling. I like ecology. But I just don't think there's any single part of me that would enjoy playing it. However, my favorite part about the pledge, well, there's two. One, there's a little caption underneath the photo that says, this is a game that looks as good as it plays, or plays as good as it looks. And in both cases, I think, yeah, probably. And two, their $5 option, which is a print and play, which is great that actually they're offering it for cheap. You can be the hacker pledge, and I have a fondness for anything that lets me be a hacker. Probably stemming from that one time I played Fortnite with, I don't know, he had to have been an 8-year-old. He was on a microphone, and it may have been the best time of my life as we landed on the ground. He immediately died and said that there were hackers who killed him, and I revived him, and then he ran into a building and said, hackers! They just appeared in front of me! This is also while he was saying in the background, Mama, does coffee make you less tired? It was a joyful game. So thank you, Solarpunk Futures, for bringing back that memory for me. Anyway, if you're interested in that one, it's 10:27 a.m. on Sunday. That's when it finishes up. I don't know. I don't mean to be too harsh. I'm sure there are people out there. It's funding, which is amazing. So I'm happy it's getting into the right hands, but I am equally happy that those hands are not my hands. And maybe I'm a bit disappointed because here's a game that isn't funding. It's called This Didn't Happen. And it's a time travel co-op game. It might get there. I'm not sure if it will, to be honest. But I just have to mention it because I think it's a fantastic name for a time travel game. Almost as good as That Time You Killed Me by Pandasaurus. But what's better than both of those titles combined is the line in the video when describing the situation of the kaiju that is about to devastate humanity. We gots to fiddle with history to unbirth that big lizard. So there's going to be these 3 timelines laid out, and you can move your character card, which is a card, not a piece, just a card, and you can move them to anywhere in the time stream or back to the time machine. The time machine is going to slowly progress further and further until it hits the end times, as you can see it happening. You can't send the time machine backwards. You can just zap yourself backwards and then beam you up, Scotty, back to the time machine, I guess. Hey, that's about as reasonable as all other time machines that I've seen. Perhaps even more reasonable than some. But the goal of the game is to reverse the apocalypse, to turn those scary black apocalypse symbols of doom into the much less scary red apocalypse symbols. Because if there's one thing I learned about red symbols, it's that they've never ever had any negative connotations whatsoever. So if you see a red symbol, go on through. It's probably safe. But it seems like an alright little game, a little simplistic for my tastes. You can do a number of different things on your turn, gather resources, use those resources in certain spots to help change time. That's the general overview. Or you can save them up for when various events happen. Because if I've learned one thing from time travel, it's that changing time can cause other weird things to happen. That's why I try to only do it once a week. That's my limit. Less ripples that way. It also seems weird to me that you move your character card around instead of a pawn. It feels like that would be clunky, but I think it's just because they wanted to send it out in these tuck boxes, and so they didn't want the pawns. But I mean, you could probably fit 4 little pawns in there as well. I mean, if I've learned anything from my Rising Sun storage solution, or from watching RuPaul's Drag Race, a little tuck does go a long way. Anyway, it's 41 bucks Canadian for the game, or 15 bucks for the print and play. I think that's probably too much for it. At the current stage that it is right now, it really looks like a prototype. It's got that prototypey feel to it. And it just isn't as refined as I'd want it to be, both in the art and in the rulebook too. So I'm personally going to probably take a pass on it. I mean, I take a pass on everything, let's be real. But if that looks interesting to you, check it out. That finishes Monday at 9:43 a.m. Now, next up we have Dirty Laundry, whose video is incredibly confusing. I mean, it's not that confusing. You get the gist pretty quickly. The goal of the game is to be the first person to wash all of your dirty clothes. But this video is sped up at 2 times the speed, so it's almost unintelligible to the human ear what they're saying. And then they repeat it. So instead of playing the video for the normal speed once, they play it quicker twice. Because if you miss something the first time, well, then you can get it again on the second pass through. I mean, it's not like it was too long, it was too short. What's the deal with the 2 times speed? I mean, it's great when you don't have a punchline, you just do a bad Seinfeld impression and move on. But what's really disappointing about this one is that they say that you choose a character, or they say you're going to take on these characteristics, like being a saboteur or working with everyone to clean the laundry. And so I was under the impression heading into it that there were going to be these hidden roles. And yeah, maybe you want your laundry to get clean, or maybe you don't want your laundry to get clean. Maybe you win if you manage to make everybody's white laundry red by throwing in a red sock. Like all those different things that you'd have to figure out amongst everybody else. But there isn't. They just say, oh, you may want to do all of these things. You may want to play the game in this way. At a certain point, if you're not winning, you may just want to break all the laundry machines so that nobody wins. You just get to ruin everyone else's garments and who cares what happens? Everybody loses. Screw you for even playing. And it's just so confusing. It's so confusing to me why they would market it that way and then not deliver on that sort of promise. Because the game itself is fine. It's a great concept. Washing the dirty laundry, having to put it in these various laundry bins. Oh, you don't know who's going to put what card in. There's mistrust around the table. Everyone's fighting cutthroat and to take that way. I love the theme. I think it's cool. But when you don't deliver on all these characteristics, when you say everyone chooses a character, but then the characters seem to be known to everyone. So if I'm the saboteur, well, why would anybody wash laundry with me? That kind of defeats the purpose of what I would want to be doing in that game. So I don't know, but if you are in Australia, listen up, because you're the only person who would be able to get this for decent shipping. It's $8 shipping in Australia. It's something like $20 in Canada or the US, and that's way too much for a game that already costs like $35 and is just a light, flavorful card game. But if this does seem like something you're into, this take that, hate everyone around the table fest, well, check it out. You have until next Monday, January 31st at 6 p.m. to decide. And finally, we end with the solo version of a classic. Don't have any friends around to trade with because you scarred them all when you used that Monopoly card after trading them your valuable rock and taking it all back? Well, don't worry, you can Catan again. With Yucatan. Okay, fine, that's not what it is. This one is brought to you by the same people who brought you Kemet, or Kemet Blood and Sand, which was just Kemet minus the horribly named white power tiles, and threw in Cthulhu for some reason. I mean, at least I hope they changed the name. I really can't remember. But in this game, you try to appease the endless hunger of the gods by sacrificing prisoners to them every turn. What is this? Marvel zombies? What's the deal with hunger? But the best part of this campaign, bar none, is the little asterisk that they have to put at the end of their video, which says, stone tablet not included. What? The giant stone tablet isn't a Kickstarter exclusive? I can see why this campaign isn't doing as well as Kemet. And I also now have learned that it's pronounced Kemet, because that's what they say in their promo video, and I assume they're doing it right. And so don't worry, you can pledge for Kemet as well for 86 euros. If you missed the Kemet Blood in the Sand, I just want to say Kemet. But if you missed that campaign, you can get it for 86 euros when it was 69 euros. So a slight bump, but not bad for those of you who decided, oh man, I really need this. But the prospect of this game is an interesting one. I really like the idea of cramming in this large battler experience into an hour. That's something I'm kind of always on the lookout for. I don't have that many of those games that feel like a really full, rich experience in that time frame. And this looks to pull a bunch of things that I like about Kemet into a smaller, quicker package. Or maybe not smaller, but a quicker package. Because it's going to be all about leveling up your different abilities, like you do with the pyramids in Kemet. But the core of the game comes with how you sacrifice your prisoners every round. Because at the end of each round, you have a chance to sacrifice prisoners for points. But the catch is, the prisoners are worth the most if you sacrifice them at the beginning of the game. They're worth more than if you hold them to the end. But if you don't sacrifice more and more prisoners every turn, you don't get to advance on the evolution track, and you don't get to upgrade those skills and give yourself these boosts for the rest of the game. So it's about finding that balance between having your liver now or waiting for it later when you've gotten yourself a fine Chianti. Hey, the gods are hungry. They gots to eat. So this one does look like a cool one. On your turn, you'll take a building action and then a leader action, and then there's going to be battles that are fought, and the battle system is you just playing a card from your hand, very similar to Ankh. Everybody commits one card, and then you add the strength, and you take the different effects on the card and you implement it in the battle. And you're fighting over these different cities, which will give you resources like corn and jade. So definitely worth checking out. That one finishes next Tuesday, February 1st at 10:53 a.m. And that's all. That's it for the week. Again, another pretty quick week. Every week I do a pick for me and a pick for you. If I have to choose, if I must, Pablo's gun to my head. What games are the most interesting to me if I had to pick one? I was contemplating not having a pick for me this week. I'm still gonna give it to Yucatan, but I think there is enough of an interesting puzzle there to make me want to try it. I don't think I'm gonna drop $100 Canadian on it plus shipping. That doesn't make any sense when I have Kemet in my collection and I haven't played that a whole bunch. But I like the promises that it's making me. I like the concept of committing now or committing later. I think that's gonna provide a really interesting push and pull. And so it's definitely one that I am interested in trying down the line, but absolutely not one that I need to get a Kickstarter. And speaking of that, let's go to the pick for you, which I gotta give it to Skytear Horde, I do. But again, with that caveat that I don't know if you necessarily need to get it during this Kickstarter. I'm not sure as to how wide the wide release is going to be of this game. They've done very well, but it depends where that market is and if the market for the solo-only genre is widely appealing to a friendly local game store. Because if I had it my way, I wouldn't recommend getting Skytear Horde right now. I'd recommend waiting till it's in a retail store and you can save on the shipping, because you're not missing out on a lot if you don't get the retail version and you were to get the retail version later. But I'm not 100% sure, or even 80% sure at this point, how wide that distribution net is going to be, so I hesitate to counsel in that way. So if you are interested, look it up, maybe ask some questions, see if you can get it for cheaper, or if obviously you want that higher pledge tier, go for it. That makes sense getting it from the Kickstarter because that'll be less available as it goes on. But that was a fun one. Again, I would go and watch the review. You'll get a sense if the game is right for you or not. I don't want to rehash it too much here. I had fun. I had fun with it, and I think it will deliver on those promises. I think that's how I finished my review as well. It will deliver on those promises. That it makes you, it just depends on if you want those promises or if those promises are right for you. So that's my caveat. I'm still putting it forward as the pick for you, but with a hesitancy because it's not for everyone. It's not always pan-applicable. But I didn't want to do it in the pick for me because I'm also not like a solo player. So take what you will. That was the week. As always, let me know, what are you backing? What are you not? What are you looking forward to? Are there things coming out that I should be on the lookout for? I appreciate all of your comments, and I always love hearing from you. And yeah, just let me know. Or let me know how your day's going, because I hope it's going really well. Anyway, once again, my name is Chris George, and I don't have a catchphrase. All I know is if you Catan, I Catan. We all Catan for ice. Catan. I'm so sorry. I'll see you in the next one. Maybe. I'll do better next time, but I hope to see you there.